had a Craigslist experience once. Absolutely the worst website on the planet. I swear to God, nothing enabled folks to be weirder in the early 2000s. I had just bought an old house and needed some roommates to help pay the bills. It was pre-global financial collapse, as I doubt the bank would have lent me $300K on a $35K salary today. But back then, it was nothing, no problem. Hell, they probably would have loaned me more had I just made the request. So anyway, I got my loan, bought the house, and now I got a mortgage to pay. Eventually, I was forced to lower my already very low standards and took on some very subpar housemates. Housemate number 1 was skinny as a rake and took my, "Hey, I'm cool, you can smoke whatever in the big shed if you want," to mean, "Hey, why don't you and all your mates spend every night in the shed, blasting Metallica through the tiny speakers and leaving bongs everywhere, using my jars of nuts and nails as target practice?" There would be total strangers coming and going from the property as essentially at all hours, all of them filthy and high as a kite. It was a very scary and unpredictable atmosphere. This guy that we'll call Lars was a bit older than me, and he always wore these sleeveless shirts and just had really bad manners. He was always in a good mood though, with a good attitude, but he was a total burnout and smelled like he had never taken a shower. The idea of him living in my house was a tough pill to swallow. Housemate number 2 seemed like a better candidate. He was unmarried, morbidly obese, and between jobs, but was a qualified former chemical engineer with no pets. Only it wasn't. Everything he told me was a line of shit, end to end. This housemate turned out to be a compulsive liar, and we'll call him Bilbo. Firstly, the day before he moved in, Bilbo admitted that he had a Maltese Terrier and had intentionally not mentioned it because he hadn't been able to find a place that would let him have a pet. I absolutely hate yappy dogs, but to its credit, it was actually pretty chill. My advertisements had been specific about no animals, so this should have been my very first red flag that Bilbo was massively dishonest. But I made that naive mistake of giving him the benefit of the doubt. Later, I discovered that the qualified chemical engineer is code for "I once worked at a paint factory." It turned out that Bilbo had been unemployed for a very long time, going on a decade or so. The other issue was that his unemployment benefits had dried up or expired at some point in the past, so he was in some serious debt and financial dire straits. None of this was disclosed to me until he had fully moved into his quarters. Then he started bringing very young boys into his room at random hours, who he would introduce as his nephews, even though they were very clearly not. As if that wasn't disturbing enough, they actively avoided me, did not look or talk to anybody else in the house, as if they'd been instructed to stay quiet. This went on for weeks, and when I look back, I just think about what the fuck? How could he have been so detached from reality that he would just bring this twink guest through the house in such a creepy manner? My own behavior too. How did I let these people into my home? The way they would avoid eye contact and never speak still makes me uncomfortable to this day. Bilbo and his dog would spend the entire day sleeping in his room. As in, he might emerge once or twice a day to use the bathroom and kitchen, but that was it. The dog had a bowl which he kept full of food at all times, which in turn brought mice from outside. I asked him to feed his dog by putting food in it once a day. He informed me that wouldn't be possible, as the dog likes to snack. I told him that the mice needed to go, and if that meant his dog had to go, then so be it. He took the bowl away, but his energy shifted in that moment onward. Everything became an act of passive aggression. I would come home from work and find somebody had used my personal bathroom. I would know this because the evidence for some catastrophic shit only a morbidly obese man could take or produce. On top of that, sometimes there would be little dog turds scattered around my bedroom, so I knew the dog had definitely been in there as well. Once my whole room reeked like cigarette smoke, and to this day I'm not sure who did it. There was even some ash and a burn mark on my end table. Bilbo didn't smoke, but he hated me, so perhaps he maybe gagged down a cigarette just to spite me. Lars, on the other hand, did smoke, and for other reason, I could see him casually lounging in my nice clean bed while he nodded off on his drugs. Both of their habits started to amplify. Lars drank and smoked more. Bilbo started to eat all the time, around the clock. I would hear him scurrying through the house in the middle of the night, using the microwave, mixing stuff in a bowl, from 2 a.m. to about 4 a.m. The man ate so much throughout the night, he had to sleep all day just to survive. Predictably, this made him get bigger and bigger. He had to have been more than 400 pounds by this stage. But it wasn't caused by him sleeping all day. He blamed it on the chemicals at the paint factory that he once worked at. In fact, he was trying to get a disability pension so he wouldn't have to work again. Complete mastermind at work, or I'm sure he thought that. Meanwhile, he was packing on the pounds and keeping younger and younger company. I would later learn that this is a somewhat common fetish inside some communities. Eventually, the arguments between Lars and Bilbo over the dog shit and late night music got to the point where these two would start screaming at one another over anything at all hours. It was madness, and I didn't have a solution for it. One day though, I came home and things had escalated beyond my ability to deal with. Something had happened between the two of them, and the confrontation turned physical. After a brief shoving match and several threats, Lars picked up a kitchen knife and calmly explained to Bilbo that if he didn't leave him alone, he was going to take the knife to Bilbo's dog and make sure it didn't survive. Bilbo reacted as you might imagine at first, became flustered, terrified, and scrambled for his dog, tried to lock himself inside his bedroom. Lars continued to goad him, and eventually, Bilbo took the bait. He snapped and went after him. When I got into the house, they were in the kitchen, wrestling over the knife, and the dog barking behind the closed bedroom door. It was chaotic, absolutely crazy. They even put a hole in the drywall from all the pushing around. Me, being a woman, there was no way I was getting involved. I tried talking some sense into them, but they didn't hear a word of it, so I just called the police. I had officers on the property within 15 minutes, at which point both of these dumbasses were hauled off. It was surreal to have a house empty, quiet, and now alone. I realized how much more I valued my space than I did my money, so that made the decision easy. I decided the drama was not worth $200 a week, so I kicked both of them out. Lars simply didn't give a shit, packed his stuff, and rolled on to the next flop house. Bilbo, however, being the cunning con man in his mind, thought he'd be able to threaten me with lawsuits and all kinds of illegal action. I told him he didn't have a leg to stand on, and he was lucky I wasn't suing him for the damage done to my home. Thankfully, I didn't hear from him again after that. The worst part about kicking them out was dealing with their friends. For weeks, I had Lars' burnout degenerate friends sneaking in my backyard, thinking the shed was still the Metallica den. The cops had to come once a week to haul some drugged out dipshit off my property. Bilbo's young boyish companions would still come by in the middle of the night, sometimes either knock on the door or tap on a window, scaring me half to death. I explained to them time after time that Bilbo no longer lived with me and could no longer be found here. I've never opened up my home to a stranger again. Mortgage payments be damned. Back years ago when Craigslist was a lot more popular, I moved away from my hometown and into the big city. I had a job lined up, a place to stay, all the check marks, so it was a pretty smooth transition. Still, I wasn't totally prepared for the increase in cost of living, so I found myself strapped in between all my paychecks. Well, being that everything that I needed in my life was now within a few city blocks, I decided I didn't need my car anymore. I listed it for sale, a 6-year-old Honda Accord. It wasn't anything special, but for anybody that knows cars, a well-maintained Honda can last forever. Old-timers call them bulletproof, especially a timeless Accord, so I sat back and let the buyers approach. A normal, well-dressed man comes over to see the car after a few phone calls about it. He's in his early 40s and his name is James. He's buying it for his daughter in college. Everything on the phone seems pretty normal, right down to the voice and the way James speaks. He comes across as a pretty average dude. Still, I always have my guard up when dealing with strangers, but so far, James is personable, seems legit. He test drives it with me in it. He does a thorough inspection. He negotiates the price with me for a while. He asked me to hold the car for 2 days so he can get the money and come back to pick it up. I agree, a 2-day hold where I won't sell it to anybody else. None of his mannerisms or body language gave up anything sinister about him. He really seemed like a genuine guy who just needed a little time. This was also a common request for back then, and even now and today, securing a large amount of cash can take a little time, so none of this was enough to put anything on my radar. 2 days later, James follows up. We meet again, midday, inside a normal neighborhood in an urban city. We test drive the car one more time. He gives me a Chase Bank cashier's check, which I said was fine. I tell him he needs to come to the bank with me to cash this check and get the title notarized and then over to him. That's when he starts acting nervous. I notice this slight shift in his behavior almost immediately. I can't really put my finger on it, but what would make him so nervous? Maybe he really can't afford this car and feels guilty handing over so much cash. Whatever the case, I keep an eye on the sweat starting to build, now along James's brow. As we're pulled over on the side of my street discussing this, James is in the driver's seat and me in the passenger. I figured if he was going to steal my car, he would have done so days earlier. Hell, he knew exactly where I parked it. He could have stolen it in the dead of night if he really wanted to. Now, I'm fairly comfortable with him, and he asked me one more time to do a car inspection with him, and then we'd go to the bank. I agree, but I'm very set on doing the transaction at the bank. It's the only way to ensure some semblance of safety. As we both get out to inspect the car again, he tries to immediately jump back into the car. He isn't as quick as he thought he was, and before he knew it, I literally jumped over the hood of the car and was yanking James back out of the open driver door. He makes this face like, okay, you caught me, shrugs and even kind of giggles. His excuse is he was just kidding around. I shake my head, so unsure of what to even believe, when James slides a switchblade out of his pocket and tells me to back away. I furrow my brow, even more confused than ever. What the hell is going on? Before I could respond, James lunges at me with the blade, and he gets me to start backwards, and then full bore kicks me right in the junk. The pain that exploded through my body will haunt me forever. It felt like somebody had shot a firework up my ass. I crumbled right there on the shoulder of the road. James hopped in the Honda and almost runs me over as he peels out onto the street. He pulls away quicker than I can react. The passenger door is still wide open. This all happened in slow motion. I could see the anxiety stamped on James's face. This was a man unconfident in his abilities. This was a man who was totally unsure of his next move. Regardless, he had buttered me up and beat me to the punch. I watched in total disbelief as my for sale Honda rolled on down the road without me in it. I remember smacking the asphalt in frustration, taking a deep breath and just trying to get myself together. I tried to run after him, but obviously I'm not as fast as a car, especially after getting kicked in the nuts. There were bystanders and I hysterically asked somebody to call 911, explaining I'd been robbed and assaulted. Finally, one guy does. I had my phone, but my adrenaline was just through the roof. I didn't even think of it as an option in the moment. I probably looked pretty extra crazy, but I think the fact that the car was literally racing down the street from me told the onlookers there was more at hand than just me just shouting. Something was definitely up, and these folks listened enough to help, thankfully. As I'm on the stranger's phone with dispatch, an undercover cop car with 2 officers pulls up from an alley about 5 feet away from me. I wave them down hysterically and explain my story. I can see in their expressions they're buying every word that I'm saying, so I start gaining a little bit of confidence. maybe we'll actually be able to stop this asshole James before I'm totally screwed. They tell me to hop in the back of their car, to which I do, after giving that gentleman his phone back. I implore them to hurry up. Maybe we can catch this guy. He just drove off. I explain the car and the plate and everything. They assure me they're not going to go on a high-speed chase with me in the car, but will radio it in to surrounding officers, to which they do. This kind of takes a lot of the wind out of my sail. I thought this was about to be an episode of Cops, and we were going to rip ass after James and bust him. Instead, they just collected details from me, as many as they could, while telling me what process is going to be like to get my car back, if I even do. The guy gets away, and the officers drop me off at the police station to file up a proper report. I filed an insurance claim too. I was so mad at myself for letting this all happen. I suppose it's better than if I was actually in the car with this guy, but I was still pissed. And of course, James' burner cell phone didn't work as soon as he left. He turned out to be actually a better criminal than I initially gave him credit for, as he seemed like such a typical white-collar dude, and seemed nervous the moment the criminality got real. I don't know, I guess I just pegged him completely wrong. I go through insurance and their protocols to ensure that I'm not committing fraud for about 3 months. This actually had me sweating bullets, and insurance investigators literally showed up at my house, made sure the car wasn't actually around. I didn't really realize I would be the first suspect for people that I was trying to file a claim with. The week that I'm supposed to get my payout, I get a call from the police. They found the car, 3 states over. I was absolutely blown away. I remember my mouth going totally dry and my fingertips just going numb. James was working with a partner in crime. I don't remember that guy's name. Let's just call him Dickface. James stole the car, gave it to Dickface to sell, so it wasn't traceable back to James, and Dickface would have a plausible deniability if he was ever questioned. It was a real Three Stooges type of crime setup, thinking they had some kind of crazy loophole that would keep them out of trouble. Well, Dickface sold my car to Average Joe, who actually did have a daughter in college who needed the car itself. The daughter tried to register a new car at the DMV. It came up stolen. So the cops arranged for me, Average Joe, and Dickface to meet up with them at the station for a little chat. Finally vindicated, I was going to get my money, possibly even my car, and more than that, I'd be able to look at this asshole in the face and tell him how I hate his guts. Dickface denies any involvement with James, but agrees to give us the money back that Average Joe paid him, if he can just leave without any other problems. We all agree to this. Average Joe and I say his daughter can keep the car, and I'll take the money from Dickface. This isn't really ideal, but it's something akin to justice, I guess. I spoke out at one point, expressed being displeased with this whole ordeal. I said that Dickface should be investigated, and that depending on what they find, I'd like to press charges. I've been robbed and assaulted, I quickly reminded them, and I wasn't planning on letting that just go by the wayside. As I start making this stink, everybody in the room can see that Dickface is starting to sweat, pretty badly at that. I turned to him and asked what he thought, to which he stammered out a reply of some kind. At that point, I laughed in his face, told him he's an idiot. He better get his shit together in the future. He nodded and then just didn't make eye contact with me again. So, eventually I guess I got paid for my car, but this experience just sucked. It was very stressful. Since then, I have bought and sold cars on Craigslist again, so I guess there wasn't really a lesson learned here. Except now, I take a photo of the driver's license of all the people that I interact with, immediately at the start. Risk is just, I guess, a part of my life now. I needed more money than I was making. This is what led me to explore back alley options, like Craigslist. I'm living in a shitty town where old folks go to die. Opportunities were not abundant, so I was stuck working in a restaurant with not much else on my horizon. I even had a meeting with career opportunities people at my college, which amounted to a glorified Google sesh, where they taught me how to use snagajob.com and Indeed for a fucking minimum wage job that just didn't cut it for me. It wasn't that I needed to be working every hour of my day for the bare minimum. I needed a career opportunity that would allow me to make more money in the same amount of time. So Craigslist was kind of my last resort. I sent out 1 or 2 emails and got a hit almost immediately. A dental office worker position that sounded pretty great for me. I had some office work in the past, which was my previous worst life experience, but that was due to more the senility of the mad woman in charge of that office, so I figured I was in the clear with this one. Hell, the pay was even better than my previous office gig, so I responded back in the affirmative. I was speaking directly with the head dentist, who was planning to move from California to the shitty small town of Prune Juice and Tombstones, and given his age and eccentricities, that all made sense in my mind. This guy was also Russian, so I brushed off some minor syntax issues with his emails by reading them with a slight Russian accent. I still get mad when I think about this. I fell for all of it. This asshole had every red flag possible, and I found a way to explain them all away with logic and reason. That's how desperate I was for a decent paying job that would at least allow me to have some semblance of control over my life. I don't really understand some of what he messaged me. He told me I'd be working from home for a few weeks while he got his things in order for the move. He'd also be sending me some office materials, which included a laptop, a portable all-in-one printer, scanner, and fax machine, a hard drive for external backup, internet security software, and QuickBooks software. Seemed legit enough for me so far. But then this was the confusing part. Perhaps you want to put some personal things in place before you start, so I've decided to provide you with an upfront payment of $300 for your first pay week. The remaining payment will come in your first week's check. I will include the total cost for the above materials, both shipping and installation by the technician, as well as your upfront payment of $300. I will have a certified check under my name emailed to you next week to cover the cost, so you don't have to finance them from your own personal earnings. This was my mental response in this order. Holy shit, that's a lot of money. Wait, I'm the one paying for the technician for installation and shipping the materials to me? I guess that kind of made sense. I'm acting as his PA after all. So this sort of thing might wind up being what I'm actually doing while working for him. Fraud was already on the precipice of my thoughts, so I brushed that off and proceeded under the assumption that I wasn't doing anything incredibly stupid. It took some mental processing, or mental gymnastics as others have called it, to make all of it make sense. In the end though, I rationalized it all to the process of just this new career. The dentist was happy to answer all of my questions, which gave me this deeper sense of confidence. I exchanged a few more emails with him for clarification on the breakdowns of the funds itself, and he got back to me in not much time, explaining in some more detail what my end of the work would look like. I didn't think it was a scammer. It would have done so much world building and wouldn't have so much details to answer all my questions if he really was one. So onward and upward, I guess. Things I did for a paycheck. It's worth noting that I'd asked my father and brother, both of them who were in the intelligence community, to do a little digging on this guy itself. They both came up with a real dentist by the same name in California, whose dental office had closed down. All the pieces seemed to fit in place. The guy's house was even for sale in whatever township he lived in. So short of actually making the move, everything else lined up to a T. I was fully on board after getting all this information. Next part is where I'm really stupid, and I deserve everything that happened to me. He asked me to send him MoneyGrams. For anybody who's unfamiliar with those, MoneyGrams are a great way to get cash to your pot dealer across the country via Walmart or whatever this guy was in the process of moving. Maybe this is just how he settled outstanding financials. I deposited the first check that he sent me, and I used some cash from the check for these MoneyGrams. I talked to him on the phone several times at this point, and he did have a faintly some kind of accent. I go to sleep that night wondering about the new upgrades that I'll be making to my life once this job finally takes off. I envision riches, vacations, free time, a lavish new lifestyle. Hell, maybe I'll even go to dental school. I wake up and my world is on fire. My bank account is in the negative. The check had come back forged, with a massive penalty for depositing a fake check. Money from the MoneyGrams had already gone through. Check for the technician successfully deposited. Negative $1,500 in the hole. This was a nightmare for my younger self. I definitely wasn't equipped to deal with it all. I was barely an adult, so I didn't even know where to start. My stomach was doing front flips. My throat is bubbled up with anxiety. I frantically called him, emailed him, texted him. He assures me he's working to fix everything. He's very confident it will be corrected by the afternoon. That put me at ease a little bit, as his confidence was infectious. But I'm still primed to get my money back. We agree to give it some time and let him work on getting it all reverted. He calls me later and tells me to send more MoneyGrams. I tell him I'm not doing another goddamn thing until I receive the amount taken from me in cash. He's more difficult to understand now, and I can tell that he's insisting I do my job. I tell him it's incredibly unprofessional. We need to have this resolved now before I call the police myself. This sparks his temper. Suddenly this guy's talking low, very menacingly through the phone, clearly saying my name, address, all the information I'd given to him. He says to send the requested MoneyGrams or I can kiss my shitty life goodbye. I tell him to get it fixed and then I just hang up. He calls me at 4 a.m. requesting that I do more MoneyGramming. I don't recall exactly what I growled to him on the phone, but it had to do something with my money. To my surprise, the voice growled back and told me he would kill me if I didn't get my lazy ass out of bed and send the money immediately. This got my attention. I sat up and asked who I was actually talking to. They went quiet and mumbled, then said the doctor's name. I argued. I said there's no way this was actually the dentist. I knew it was some kind of scam. They rattled off a few more threats before hanging up, and I turned my phone off at this point. I'd worked really hard to have a $300 surplus in my bank account for the first time since college, and in just a few days, it was replaced with a bigger deficit than I'd ever had before. I spent a day in my bathrobe on the couch wondering how I could be so stupid. It was the kind of personal therapy I needed, considering how embarrassing the whole ordeal was. Talking it out was probably the last thing I wanted to do, all things considered. Then 2 days later, my brother died of a heart attack. It was completely unrelated, but the combined events had my world completely fucked up there for a while. This was the same brother that done the digging on that guy that supposedly hired me. I felt guilty for getting him involved at all. So that's what really punctuates this story, makes it the worst week of my life. I don't really have a good way of wrapping this all back around to some lesson learned or a triumphant change in my outlook on things, because this was all the start of this year, when everybody that I knew was posting about how 2015 may have sucked, but 2016 is going to be the best year ever. Life is bullshit. When I first graduated massage school, I was pretty hard up for money and decided to advertise on Craigslist, despite my teachers repeatedly warning me against that very thing. But I'm a male, so I figured I'd be fine. I was pretty explicit about not offering sexual services, being straight, professional, all those kinds of buzzwords. And by and large, it's men that conduct a lot of the sexual mischief, so I just made sure to vet the potential customers that reached out to me. A dude named Charlie messaged me, arranged for a 90-minute deep tissue at 9 p.m. on a Friday. He also requested a picture, which is a big red flag. When I asked why, he said it wasn't for anything creepy, He just wanted to be able to identify me when I arrived, and for safety reasons. I was like, well, I guess that kinda makes sense. His house was also within throwing distance of my school. He claimed he gotten the student massages there as well. The more he went on about himself, the more it put me at ease. He seemed pretty normal. Just wanted to make sure he opened the door for the right person when I arrived and not some stranger. Charlie explained then that he'd been robbed before and had no desire for it to happen again. I showed up that Friday, ready for a normal service. Charlie instructed me to enter through the side door that led into his basement, already really throwing me off. I see him peeking through the blinds as I approach. I'm getting weirded out already, but I did bring a knife, so I steel myself and enter his house. Although looking back now, how desperate was I? I needed to strengthen my resolve and carry a blade with me. Being a fucking massage therapist, how much danger could there really be in here? Charlie is balding, middle-aged, bug-eyed, and smiles like an anthropomorphic spider. I do not like this. His basement is wood-paneled, which just brings to mind so many PSAs from the 80s about stranger danger. There's a motorized wheelchair in one corner, and he ushers me inside the house. The basement is being remodeled. The massage will take place in a bedroom at the very rear. He explained that the basement is the most neutral area inside the house, very quiet and stays cool, naturally dark. He knows it's weird, but it's his favorite place to get a massage. I nod along, carrying my equipment as I follow him into the shadows. In the hallway, my heart nearly implodes as I see a heavy-set woman with thick glasses and stringy hair staring back at me. She's using a cane. I try my warmest smile and introduce myself. She just stares at me mutely. This was super unnerving. Charlie explicitly explained that he lived alone. Who the hell was this lady? Her eyes told me she was definitely drugged up on something, so I didn't waste any more time trying to talk with her. Charlie quickly guides me away from her into the bedroom, as if she's some kind of temperamental dog that might bite me. I asked to use the restroom, desperate to get some space from the suffocating environment below ground, surrounded by people that I don't know or trust. The bathroom down here isn't finished yet. Okay, can I go upstairs then? No. I probably should have just left right then, but I really needed the money. Figured maybe this couple was just weird, and I was being paranoid. I set up my table and get Charlie situated. I should not have been surprised when he stripped all the way down. Then he asked if he can watch Dancing with the Stars while I work on him. I try not to laugh, and I tell him go ahead. Dude is clearly a repressed homosexual who married an angry beard. Fuck it, I'll give him his massage and get paid and go. As long as he doesn't make a move on me, I don't really care. The truly funny part was this guy had so many requests, so many hoops for me to jump through. But when I had to take a piss, he couldn't even accommodate me. It's like he relished the thought of me bursting behind my zipper. You're a goddamn weirdo. I spent a majority of the 90 minutes on his legs, which was a bizarre request. But I was still a noob, and he explained that he ran marathons. Toward the end, he gets annoyed and says, "I think that's enough work on my legs now." It caught me off guard because, as I said, he specifically asked me to rub his legs. Only after he realized that like 40 minutes had gone by, did he want something else worked on. He then asked if I would work on his abdomen, which is also pretty rare in our field. He said he lost several hundred pounds over the last few years. Heard that regular massages can help with excess skin. This is true, but requires daily massage in conjunction with a lot of other things. I couldn't really tell if he was being genuine or just knew enough lingo to make his request seem less weird than it actually was. Reluctantly, I agree. 5 minutes later, I see the sheet begin to lift. Dude pops a 10. My first professional massage, and now I'm confronted with my worst fear, a raging boner. I just kept glancing at it for a while, as if I didn't quite believe it was real. When it stood up on its own and didn't go away, I knew I had to do something. This was a self-creating problem, and unless I address it, it was only going to get worse. Finally, I snap out of it and stop the massage. Hey man, that's gotta stop or we're done here. Charlie looks confused. He glances from the TV to me to his boner. Oh, that's me. Yeah, I don't know what that means. Do you think your dick was possessed, Charlie? I take my hands off him and repeat my statement. It needs to cease and desist or I'll be on my way. Charlie apologizes again and explains that he was just dozing off. I look around, take inventory of the room, and I spy his wife or whoever that woman was, peeking in on us from the crack in the door. It was like some kind of weird reverse cuckolding. The wife liked watching her closeted husband harass straight men. I tell him it's fine, perfectly natural response, but he needed to calm down because I was not a sex worker. He blushed and apologized. We just went ahead and ended the massage there. He paid me the full amount and I packed up to leave. As I'm doing so, Charlie is getting dressed very, very slowly, rolling his shoulders out, letting his manhood just free hang right there in front of me. As I'm finishing up, I ask if he wants to walk me out, to which he declines. He asks me if I remember the way out and I say yes. We thank each other, have a mutual goodbye, but then Charlie stops me before I step into the hallway. One more thing, he says, holding out a folded $100 bill in front of him. I don't even respond, just wait to see what he's gonna say, and I know it's gonna be fucking weird. You saw a lot of me, he explains. It made me feel vulnerable. Maybe I could see some of you. I smile and shake my head. Tell him that the massage work is the only thing I'm doing, nothing sexual. Charlie scoffs, clearly offended, then pretends like he never said anything at all. In fact, he's acting as if I just propositioned him for sex, and now I need to leave. Okay, fine with me. I carry all my stuff down the hall as he rants and raves to himself in that back room. His wife is nowhere to be found, and when I get to the door, it's locked top to bottom, like with 9 different mechanisms. As I'm slowly getting all of them unlatched, I can hear somebody creeping down the basement steps from the upper house, one creaky stair at a time. Sweating by the time I get to that last one and get it undone, then step out into the afternoon light. I threw my stuff in my car and just blasted for home. I wasn't 5 minutes out the door before I got a text message asking if he can schedule a 2-hour undraped massage next week, as in fully nude and exposed in all his glory. I couldn't even believe what I was reading. Considering the manner in which I just left Charlie's property, he was clearly bipolar with some weird twisted fetishes. His wife had to be too. I politely declined. Well, by the end of the week, I was getting a different kind of massage from Craigslist. It turned out that Charlie went on a digital warpath after we parted ways, making posts about a sexually aggressive massage therapist, which included both my name and the photo that I made the mistake of sending him. He went on at length about all the manner of stuff that he made up, saying I was an unprofessional pervert, shouldn't be licensed to be serving in the city that we lived in. My online presence was taking a serious hit because of this guy. On top of that, I got a call from the massage therapy school that I mentioned to you before, the one Charlie lives so close to. It turned out somebody had printed out several hundred flyers with my name and photo on them, alongside those same sexual accusations, threw them all over the campus. My entire reputation was down the toilet in less than 24 hours. Fortunately for me, many folks in that area were familiar with this asshole and helped me set the record straight. Charlie was such a predator that he and his wife actually moved after the whole debacle was over. To this day, and to my knowledge, nobody lives in that house with a half-remodeled basement anymore. Be careful who you work with out there, and never, ever get your customers from Craigslist.